If you had told me a few years ago that Triumph would release a beginner motorcycle that looked this good, I would say, well, yeah, Triumph's a premium brand, so you're gonna have to pay a little bit more. Which is why when they announced this motorcycle cost under $5,000, they completely subverted all expectations. But the thing is, where did they cut corners? How did they make this motorcycle so cheap? And in today's video, I'm gonna dissect the Speed 400 up and down and find out if it's worth your time. We're gonna get this motorcycle out on the road and render an opinion on Triumph's new pint-sized beginner motorcycle. Let's take a look at some of the finer details on this machine. I can remember a time when Triumph didn't have a clear power progression ladder. What do I mean by that? Well, for full-line manufacturers like Honda or Yamaha, they got bikes you can jump into as a beginner and then clearly make your way up the ladder until you achieve their flagship machine, something like an R1 or a Honda CB1000R. With Triumph, up until very recently, your point of entry was a Bonneville, which for a lot of guys didn't make a lot of sense. It was expensive, it was heavy, and its 900cc parallel twin, while being somewhat approachable for a beginner rider, kind of weeded out anybody that didn't want a big ol' engine. Now you have this motorcycle, the Speed 400 and the subsequent Scrambler 400 models. That gets you into maybe the Trident 660 or the Daytona 660 as a step up. You could also go into the Bonneville line and step up into a larger retro classic machine. You can then go to a Street Triple 765 for the intermediate middleweight category and make your way all the way up to a Speed Triple 1200RR or even a Rocket 3. They're starting to look more and more like a real full-line manufacturer that you can get into and stay into for the long term. And that's huge for business. And don't take it from me, the numbers simply don't lie. Triumph has sold over 50,000 of these Speed 400 and Scrambler 400 models in the 1 year that they've been released. For context, Ducati sells a little over 50,000 motorcycles in an entire year across their entire range. So how did they do it? By partnering with Bajaj in India. Triumph was incredibly detail-oriented in working with Bajaj to make sure that the Speed 400 still felt like a Triumph product. And Indian-made motorcycles are nothing new. We've seen this in the category with KTM, the Duke, and the RC models of the 390s for years now. They've been produced in India. And also, adjacent to that, Honda's been producing motorcycles in Thailand for, I think, decades at this point. Even Ducati assembles motorcycles in cheaper markets, and if that doesn't convince you, Royal Enfield is obviously designed and built in India, and those seem popular enough here in the United States. The whole trick to doing this internationalized, globalized motorcycle thing correctly is to design the motorcycle in your home country with very detailed schematics and then hire a factory overseas that has high levels of quality control to build the product to your specifications for cheaper. Think of the way that Apple designs all their products in California and then has manufacturing in China. Now, we could make a whole separate video about whether or not this is good for the global economy, but one thing is for sure, we get cheaper motorcycles, which is what people want because they'd vote for those decisions with their dollars in their wallets. And that's just a simple fact. Consumers want the best possible product for the cheapest amount of money, and I think Triumph has done a pretty good job here. I mean, check out this new TR Series single-cylinder engine from Triumph. This thing looks like the big brother Bonneville, with the pseudo air fins just like the other bike, the blacked out radiator, the really nice exhaust pipe that sticks out of here. This is a handsome engine, and even better, it makes modern power. This is a 398cc liquid-cooled single-cylinder motor with dual overhead cams and 4 valves. It's making 39.5 horsepower at 8,000 RPM and 27.7 foot-pounds of torque at 6,500 RPM. The engine is actually slightly over square, meaning that it can rev to a little past 9,000 RPMs, no problem. The engine also has a counter-rotating balance shaft to help control some of the vibrations that you'd get from a single cylinder. And check this out back here, the chain is actually routed on the opposite side that you'd normally find, just like a Triumph Bonneville. I've actually had this motorcycle for a while in the garage, and I've sat here looking at it trying to figure out how did they make it look so good? The Speed 400 has a 300mm rotor with a sport bike level pad pinched by a bi-bree brake that's radial mounted. Now, the bi-bree brake is kind of a dead giveaway that this is an Indian-made motorcycle, as it is a subsidiary of Brembo, and the braking feel leaves a little bit to be desired. We'll talk about that when we're out there on the road. I think the gold tube forks are such a cool touch in this machine. It really classes up the whole bike, and this carnival red color just looks so good too. Notice also that the fork is an upside down unit at 43mm, giving it a little bit beefier stature. The Speed 400 has a relatively simplistic shock out back that's adjustable only for preload. I like to set the sag on every motorcycle that I test, and this motorcycle did not require any adjustments as the sag was sitting just right for me. Swinging a leg over the Speed 400, and you notice it's kind of a small motorcycle. It's about like 85% sized like a normal bike. If you're an entry-level rider, you may not even notice this, but it is a little bit small. I'm about 5'11" with a 32-inch inseam at about 165 pounds, maybe 175 with all of my gear on, and I find this motorcycle to be a tiny bit cramped. It's something I could get used to and live with, but I think if you're a larger rider, sort of 6 foot up, 200 pounds up, this may not be a good fit for you. Now, I do think this motorcycle would work well for smaller statured riders, female riders, anybody under 5'6" or something like that would fit pretty good on this thing. It's got a nice neutral stance, and at 375 pounds wet and ready to ride, it's a very, very easy to manage machine. The other thing that's kind of neat is that the Triumph Speed 400 has a little USB-C plug-in right here on the side of the headlight, so if you wanted to just pop that in, charge up your phone while you ride, it's ready to go. Today's video is of course powered by Eurocycle. That's the reason I have this Speed 400 here in the shop, and the reason I'm able to show you guys everything about this machine. They're a dealer partner of ours that we worked with for years. I've bought so many motorcycles from them, and the coolest part about them is they can deliver all over the country. They're willing to price match any dealership you find just to make the sale. They got a used bike inventory of over 200 motorcycles right now, and I'm sure you can find a Ducati, an MV Agusta, a Triumph, an Aprilia, a BMW, any awesome, cool, European-flavored motorcycle going straight to your door. Hit the link down below and support the people who support us by making great content. Thanks again to Eurocycle for the support, and let's get back into it. All right, enough talking. Let's get this bike out on the road. All right, boys, Speed 400 on the road. Let's fire her up. Nice Triumph key right there. Really digging this motorcycle, man. Fires right to life. Bike is already warm. Metzler Sportec tires at 34 PSI front and rear. Let's get a quick sound check. Zesty little single. And like we said in the shop, it's just a really good looking package, isn't it? Really good looking package. Feel those firing intervals. It's nice. One of the coolest things about the Speed 400 is that Triumph has engineered a fun motorcycle, a friendly motorcycle, and it's actually not that easy sometimes to engineer fun and friendly in the same bike. But that's exactly what a beginner bike should be. It should be fun, it should be cheap, it should be friendly, it should be accessible in price, in stature, and weight. And I think this thing just hits the mark on every dimension. It is such a great entry point into the world of motorcycling, man. All right, let's see if we can take off here. We sure can. Hitting the rev limiter around 10,000. And the first thing I'll tell you, two things actually. Mirrors do get a little buzzy above 60 miles an hour. I have noticed that in my initial testing. And the front brake lever, I bled it at the shop, and I've tested it in several capacities. It's just kind of squishy. You don't get much feedback from it, and the pull on the lever to start getting stopping power is a bit rough, you know? It's a little difficult to actually get it to start stopping. Start stopping, isn't that weird? Looking up into 6th gear here on this highway, we're doing about 65 miles an hour. And for a lot of North American riders, the first question about a beginner bike obviously is, how does it handle highway duties? And we're spinning up here. We'll get to about 75. I got the tacho blinking because it's probably in, like, you know, its initial run-in service, and it's like, no, don't rev it that high. But I literally have to do this speed to keep up with traffic. So what are you gonna do?
And I think the Triumph is much like, you know, kind of older beginner bikes used to be, kind of happy in that 70 to 80 spot. And there's two reasons for that. Number one is that it's a single cylinder engine, so it doesn't love being revved out. It'll do it. This thing actually is a little over square, as we mentioned in the shop, and so it'll happily rev to, you know, nearly 10,000 RPM before cutting on the limiter. And number two, aerodynamically, you know, you don't have fairings, you don't have anything that's going to keep you a little bit more, you know, hidden from the wind, and that's going to cause some issues later down the line when you're speeding a little bit and you're coming up to, you know, some wind. That's going to be a big problem. And it's not that fully faired motorcycles are, you know, so much better at dispersing wind, but there is a difference in having your chest fully exposed like this as a sail in the wind versus a tight little compact beginner bike. Speaking of tight, the other thing I noticed on this bike is larger riders may find this motorcycle a little too small. It's about like 85% the size of a full-size motorcycle, which is great. The Triumph has actually made a Scrambler 400 version that's a little bit larger, so if you really dig the style of this bike and you want something in this size category, I would recommend getting the Scrambler 400 if you're a little bit bigger. Because me, at about 5'11", 165, 170 pounds with my gear on, whatever, I find it's a teensy bit small, but I'm also used to my Desert Sled, which is a pretty large motorcycle, and so I think I could get used to it, but it does feel a little pint-sized for someone who is a little bit more experienced. That's why I really think the case for this bike is as a runaround bike, an entry-level bike, a starter bike. I think that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't get this thing if you're doing a bunch of highway miles, although it is highly capable of doing that. It's not necessarily going to be bad at doing the highway, it's just not best suited to it. Downshifts are buttery smooth, Triumph gearbox working really well, and man, these Indian-made bikes have really come a long way. They've come a really long way, man. These bikes are really good now. Now, one thing I did want to bring to your attention as you're watching this video, there is a slight bit of snatchiness on-off throttle with this thing, and it's not terrible, you know. It's the sort of thing that you could easily get used to, but as an experienced motorcyclist, you definitely do feel it kind of snatchy a little bit. You know, if you were to go full gas like this and then brakes and then back on, it seems to work better in higher gears. You know, if you're in 4th, 5th, 6th gear, it doesn't seem to do it as bad, but lower in the revs, lower in the RPM range, lower in the gearbox too, it'll snatch a little bit. I do like these side mirrors too. I think that this is a really nice touch. It makes it feel really nice and upmarket. Really, really cool that Triumph put these on as opposed to just like the regular stock mirrors. That would have looked really weird on this thing. Let's get a quick suspension check over the bump, shall we? Let's see. Yeah, the other thing that's really cool about these Indian-made bikes, I remember the GSX 250R was like this. The Gixxer 250 we had in 2020. Not that it was an Indian-specific model, but it was a bike that was designed to be sold in that area. I find that they tune the suspension so supple for you know, the roads that they have over there, and it's really nice. I think that it works really well, and I remember the GSX 250 had even a mud flap in the back, and the suspension was quite supple, quite soft. And you know, if you have crappy roads where you live, the Speed 400 may be a really cool bike to get, because you know, it'll work really nice over those kind of bumps. All right, flicking the Triumph through a little bit faster pace here on these twisty roads, and it's a little vibrational. You know, it's a single cylinder, and when you get it up in the revs, it is a teensy bit buzzy, I will admit. It's not quite as soft and you know, whoa, nice as some of the other ones. That was a big ass pothole I hit and it took it. Freaking Triumph took it like a champ, even at lean. Good Triumph. There are obviously much sportier options in the category, and I do find this bike at its kind of smaller size is a little awkward for me to kind of hustle around some twisties, but it'll do it. And you have to remember who this bike is intended for. You know, for the entry-level rider, for someone just starting out, honestly, I think for female riders, this bike makes a ton of sense. It's not too, scary. It's kind of smaller. It's very approachable, very friendly. I could definitely see this being a fan favorite among female riders who are maybe a little smaller. Maybe they have a shorter inseam and they want something a little bit more approachable and friendly. This could probably take a lot of sales away from the Honda Rebel 300 and 500 because it's a much more handsome motorcycle, and I think it actually is way more fun to ride than the Rebel just because the geometry and ergonomics of the bike feel a little bit more neutral. And this bike, with its very neutral ergonomics, sets you up for success later down the road when you upgrade, because unless you want to stay in that cruiser category, when you jump on a standard bike that has the foot pegs underneath you instead of in front of you, you're going to be really confused. What's interesting about the Speed 400 is that the engine, since you don't really want to keep it super buzzy and high in the RPMs, I find that I ride it at like 4th and 5th gear in places that I probably would ride a normal sport bike in like 2nd gear, But it's not that nice to hustle around corners at super high RPMs. It doesn't really love that as much. Holds the line really nice though. Appropriate punch out of corners, It's got appropriate punch out of corners for the category. It's not as zesty as a Ninja 400 or, an RC 390, but it doesn't need to be because it's much more of a well-rounded package. You look at the RC 390s, the Ninja 400s, the 500s, which I haven't ridden yet. They're a little focused. They're a little sport bike-esque, This thing is so good at doing a little bit of everything. It's really, really sweet. Now, despite having the name Speed 400, I don't think this is a motorcycle that you need to really hustle around corners and to feel the speed of it. It's certainly sporty enough, and you can do the little bike thing where you get to go wide open in like 3 different gears without really breaking the speed limit too much, and that's a lot of fun. I think the look out of the dash here is really nice. It feels like a Triumph. I don't know how they've done it, but it really feels like a baby Triumph. And this price point is just ridiculous. I mean, this feels like a $6,000 or $7,000 motorcycle, not a motorcycle that's under $5,000. Let's test the 0 to 60, assuming I don't get the limiter on it. Okay, there's nobody behind me. Let's go ahead and do a little launch. 4 gears to get to 60, and there it is. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but how fun is that? I get to go through 4 gears to get to 60 miles an hour. That's pretty cool. So this section of road here is one that I take a lot of faster bikes on because it's got some really nice sweeping bends. I am in 6th gear taking these corners on this bike. It doesn't have a particularly high top speed. We will test the top speed on the highway in just a moment, but that's just to show you that, with the single cylinder, you have a lot of flexibility low down to the RPMs, and you can actually use this thing, in a very, very flexible way. I don't feel like I'm gasping for air with the engine in 6th gear going through these sweepers, and that's pretty cool. And it's going to be fuel efficient to do that too. As we mentioned in the studio, I mean, easily 200 plus miles of range with this thing all day, which is very impressive. Triumph claims 80 plus MPGs, which I'm like, dude, seriously? I mean, that's great, especially given the size of the gas tank. And that just means you have to spend less time at the pump, which is great. Okay, folks, one thing that I mentioned to you is that this motorcycle's front brake feel is really squishy, and that's quite good for beginners in a roundabout way because they can't tuck the front end. And now I wanted to show you guys how this motorcycle's slow speed prowess is. And the first thing I want to bring to your attention is just how ridiculous the lock-to-lock is. I have so much wiggle room on the lock-to-lock on this bike. Like, I can turn this bike on a dime. I mean, it almost feels like a dirt bike with how much lock-to-lock I have on it. I can literally turn it as tight as I would need to or want to. I can keep it inside this donut mark here. Look at it go, man. And that's really nice for beginners with such a generous lock-to-lock. You see these cutouts on the tank here? I mean, look at that. Look at how much you have to turn this bike on a dime. And I know why they did that, because this is an Indian market bike, and you need to have tight lock-to-lock and high levels of slow-speed maneuverability. I've ridden in India several times now, which is such a cool thing to be able to say. And yeah, you want a very nimble, very capable lock-to-lock motorcycle. Yeah, man, as tight as you want it. As tight as you freaking want it, it'll do it. The Triumph is also equipped with traction control, which will probably not allow us to wheelie. Let's go ahead and see about turning it off, shall we? Oh, I did it. Yeah, TC off. You see that? So I turned it off, and we'll test a little wheelie on the Speed 400. Yeah, it'll pop the front wheel. Will it do it in second is the question. That's really not that bad in second gear. Let's try that again in second. That's hilarious. Wow, it comes up so nice in second. You could actually get this thing to practice wheelies too. Are you kidding me? That's so good. That's crazy. That's actually crazy that you can like just push your weight back in second and do that. It's actually really rare. I've never really seen a beginner bike in second gear be able to do that so easily. Speed 400, top speed test. Let's go, baby. All right, fifth gear, pinned. Watching traffic ahead of me, making sure I got braking distance. Oh, a little under 90, sixth gear, pinned. All right, gotta start braking. I think this bike will do like 95 or 100 at the very top end of the spectrum, which is pretty good, all things considered, for a 400. That back there was going slightly downhill. Y'all saw that I was in sixth gear, pinned. Like, I mean, the speed only goes to about 110, so I think expectations-wise, you gotta keep it a little lower. So I think 95 to 100, your results may vary depending on how much frontal area you have, because that's a big consideration, right? If you're a much larger person, you're gonna create way more aerodynamic drag, and since this bike doesn't have enough horsepower to get over that drag, that's really gonna limit you. You know, it's kind of, you gotta think about like bicycle aerodynamics at that point, you know? So yeah, I'd say 95 to 100, probably your estimated top speed with the Speed 400. And you're gonna have to ask yourself, is that enough? Is that good enough for you to ride around on your highways? And you know, you're stressing the bike quite a bit riding it that high. And honestly, it really doesn't like to be that high in the RPM range. It really doesn't. You know, if you ride the machine at like 7,000 or 8,000 RPM, it's really no fun to be able to, you know, just be stuck there and constantly pinging the thing close to the limiter. So if you are in need of a motorcycle to cruise highways, maybe not the best bet, but it could definitely do your 70, 75 mile per hour highway stint.
Rounding out today's video, it is genuinely impressive what Triumph has done here. They've managed to build a motorcycle down to a price point, and yet it simply doesn't feel that way. All of the reviewers of this machine said the same thing. It's an amazing motorcycle for an amazing price, and there is no catch. I wanted so badly to find some sort of cheapness, some sort of weirdness, some sort of bad quality with this machine, but honestly, there just isn't. Sure, the throttle's a slightly bit snatchy, sure the front brake is a little squishy when you start pushing it a little bit harder, but it's a sub $5,000 machine that carries a Triumph badge on it. That's pretty sweet. This is the kind of stuff that Harley-Davidson should be doing. This motorcycle is priced super well, which means that beginner riders can feel confident about their choices and it's not gonna hurt the bank that much. It's a very handsome, cool looking motorcycle, and that matters a lot to people. And it has premium big bike presence about it, which you just simply cannot find at this price point. And best of all, it doesn't have to apologize by being some air-cooled dinosaur that makes 20 horsepower a la Royal Enfield's old offerings. This is a modern liquid-cooled bike that makes adequate, great power. It's got everything you need, nothing you don't, and I think it's a knockout hit for Triumph. And if this is the future of beginner bikes and motorcycling in general, please bring it on. We need so much more of this in our industry to get more people accessibly riding and having fun on two wheels. Thanks for watching today's review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it valuable. Let me know down below in the comments if you have any other questions or concerns or comments about the Triumph Speed 400. And big shout out once again to Eurocycle for supporting today's video. We'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later. That's all, folks. That's the end of the video. Our time is up, but if you want the conversation to keep going, join me over on yammynoob.co. Become a member. You'll gain access to our infamous Discord server. I'm on there every day, so if you want to talk to me, ask me some questions, just shoot the BS about motorcycles. That's the best way to do it, and you'll get entered to win this MT-09 SP. This is one of my favorite giveaway bikes we've done, and I would hate for you to miss out on it. But if you need a little bit of time to think about it, click the link right over here. Keep watching yourself some Yammy Noob. We have tons of premier, top tier, incredible motorcycle videos just waiting for you. They're free. Watch them.